you ask me, the greatest concern I have is the crisis of the border. We have 2 wars going on right now. We must support Ukraine. You see I wear a pin for Ukraine in the United States. And I believe that it's the best investment that the United States has ever made when you have an aggression from a country that doesn't have our values, such as Russia. And here's a country that's willing to fight and die for their values and beliefs. And all we have to do is support them. And if not, we'll be drawn into a war. I can assure you if we're not, because they'll move on to the Baltics and to all the neighboring allies that we have. And then we are drawn into that. And what we see going on in the Middle East right now, last night there was an attack on the Houthis, which I think was deserved. I think we should attack, and it should hit hard. They're out there basically shooting and doing harm to our military, and we're going to stand by and take it no. So I appreciate that in return. We'll see what happens, but we've got to. When you see what happened on October the 7th, which is just unbelievable to see that in today's world, and the type of viciousness and horrific things that have gone on. It's unbelievable. So, but the border, I can tell you, is the most serious I've ever seen in my life. It's a crisis. I don't care who you are and what you believe. I've been there. I talked to all of the representatives in Congress and the Senate that represent the border. And I'm talking north and south border, not just one. But right now, the southern border is the greatest challenge that we have. That has got to be taken care of. It does. And I would hope that the President will do what he has to do if Congress doesn't do what it needs to do. I would pray that happens very quickly. And we'll just see where that goes. But we'll find out next week. We were told before we left for Christmas, well, I was prepared to stay there all the way through Christmas, not to leave until we fix that border. And support for Ukraine and support for Israel and all the other humanitarian needs that we have. But that didn't happen. We were told that we'd go home and we'd come back and we'd be right there and take care of that pronto. We didn't do it last week. We have another week coming up. Can't go on another week. We've got to get involved. So that, the securing our border is, if you can't take care of your own borders, you can't help people take care of theirs. And that's where we are. And I think it's a great concern that people have. The easiest vote in Washington and the easiest vote in any political arena is no. You can vote no 90% of the time and have a job for life. No one puts you in a position or why you. There's always someone who agree. It's the perfect. It's not. It wasn't perfect enough, so I couldn't support it. How many times do we hear that? Just, I can find something wrong with everything, and I can give you a reason why I didn't support certain things if I'm looking for that. If I give you a no vote, the majority of the time, I'm not the right person in the political process because I'm not looking for a yes vote. How do I move forward? And that's what happens. So the no vote, I've said this before, show me a person that votes no all the time, I'll show you a person who's a lifer. They'll be there forever. It's a retirement home. I've outlined a few things that I think that can be changed, and my purpose, everyone says, well, you're running for this or running for that, and I said, no, I'm running to basically bring the country together. I want you to know there's hope. There's more people like us that believe that the centrist, center left, center right, the grand old party, and the old blue dog Democrats that were there could always get together and make a deal. And we've got to get back to that. If you're going to govern, you've got to get back to governing.
Well, let me break the news to you. Donald Trump won Iowa. So in case you didn't know that.
Was it a big victory?
It was a very big victory.
Well,
I'm wondering just what you think about that. Look, I mean, he's got a commanding hold over his party right now and his base and of pretty much all aspects of the Republican Party.
There's still a very liquid movement in the Republican Party that's looking for something different. And I think that's why you see Nikki Haley's been doing so well. And I think, this New Hampshire will be a bellwether state. I was up there last week and talking to people, and they're, it's the most independent state registration-wise. I think there's over 40% of the people that are registered to vote are registered as no affiliation or independent. And there's about 350,000 of them, and there's 100,000 that historically do not show up and vote in primaries. If they can get those out, that makes a big difference because, as you're saying, if the polls are anywhere close, then it could throw a real challenge and a real difference to what the outcome will be.
I mean, are you concerned about Trump's apparent march to the nomination here?
Well, I think if you're handicapping it, that's what you would have thought a long time ago. It looked like it was moving his in that direction. His base has been pretty much immovable, if you will. And no matter what he does, no matter how egregious it is to our society or to our country, it seems to bolden him. So there's people identifying something that everybody else is missing. But, you know, we need to be looking at the border. We need to be looking at the economic situation that we're dealing with. As James Carville said way back then, it's the economy. But it's the economy. It truly is. You know, people in West Virginia and people in hard-hit areas economically, they're not looking at the portfolio. They're looking at basically the day-to-day life that they have to live. And so they're concerned, and then having energy security. I mean, they're not talking, the president's not talking, President Biden's not talking about the things that have been done with a lot of the legislation. And most of it that has been done that's really helped the economy is done in more of a moderate, conservative, centrist way, not in a very left-leaning or an extreme right-leaning, and that's what people really want.
Do you agree? Haley said last night that the country does not want another Trump-Biden rematch. Do you agree?
Well, again, and when you look at the polls and what you all are putting out, if you're accurate or close to being accurate, it shows that very strongly. But again, no one knows. So you have to wait until Super Tuesday, I think, to really get a clear indication of where you are, who's still in it, and what's at play. That's when it'll tell you. And I know people talking about a third-party run, this and that. I've never been a spoiler, never would be participating in a spoiler. But on the other hand, is there a way that we can save the country and bring people back together? How's that going to be done, and who can do it?
Yeah. I mean, is there an opening? I mean, you're up in New Hampshire. Is there really an opening for a third party?
They don't want what they're seeing now. They don't want the direction the country's going. And that's from a very independent state. They're not extremes. I didn't run into any extremes except people that were protesting, and that was a group that came from out of state. And when you think about the IRA bill, we've done more with the Inflation Reduction Act to produce more energy in the country, to make us more energy secure, and we've invested more in clean technology for the future. It's an extremes one. It's all one way or no, or not at all, and that's the problem that we have, and people don't want that.
But I mean, there may be people who want a third party, but is that a viable path?
It's extremely tough. You know that. It's extremely tough, but we've never had this situation. Again, if the polls are close to being accurate, you never had this many percentage of people within their own party structure that are looking for something different. Can President Biden bring it back towards a center left, or center more so than the left where it's perceived to be now? And Donald Trump's not going to change. He's told you exactly what he'll do if he gets in, and when you have part of revenge as your policy, that's pretty scary.
How seriously are you thinking about third party?
Well, I'm thinking that is there an alternative? You're talking about me personally. I'm looking for an alternative that basically can bring this country together, and that's what we've done with Americans Together.
Yeah, but you personally. How serious are you personally?
No, I'll do whatever I can to help my country, and I've said that. There's a lot of good people out there, a lot of very, very competent people that can do this job and could do it and do it very well. I think where mine might be more attractive to some people because I've been able to weather a lot of the storm that's come at me, and if I can't go home and explain it, then I don't vote for it. Doesn't matter. Party doesn't drive me. Party doesn't own me. Parties can't control me. So there's, I think, a lot of people that feel like I do. They just need to step forward.
But look, the window is closing. It's January. The election's in November. You got to put an organization. You have to run a campaign. The window is closing, is it not?
I don't think. There's a lot of campaigns that have already closed that have been out there for quite some time.
But for a new campaign to run, the window's closing.
No, it's not going to be a primary. You're not going to have a campaign in the primary if there's a third party of any sort. The independent candidates you have out there now are really running and going at it pretty hard. What are they doing with the final outcome? Does that hurt or help one candidate over the other? We just don't know yet. I think it's too early to be told, but once you know you have the main Democrat candidate and the main Republican candidate after Super Tuesday, and it's pretty well sorted out, then they'll start looking at all different alternatives if there is.
So you'll make a decision after Super Tuesday?
I think anyone who's going to make any decision of how we help and bring our country back together and have Americans working together rather than trying to divide Americans, you'll know more of what the challenges you're going to have and what the obstacles could be and what the benefits could be.
So your lane, if you were to run, or someone like you, the lane would be the moderate Republican voters who are disaffected with Trump. Wouldn't that essentially elect Donald Trump then?
No, you would have, there's this, I come from a long line of very conservative, moderate Democrats, and where have they gone? They've all gone independent, or they're still in that are identified as Democrats that just don't vote a strong, extreme Democratic position. I just it's early to say, Mono.
But you would be peeling away Biden's support.
The only thing I've told you, I would never be a supporter. If I saw that spoiling to one side or the other, I mean, I'm very much concerned. I just said, and I've been very clear, I love my country too much to ever support or vote for Donald Trump. That's all I can say. It's not personal, it's just what I've seen, what I've observed, and what would happen to our country. And on the other hand, I would like to see the Democratic Party and our president move more to the center. I think it's going to be very challenging staying in that left lane.
What's next for you? You went to New Hampshire. Where are you going next?
No, my daughter Heather is kind of setting things up, and we're going to areas where people want to sit and talk, where they want to basically exchange ideas and values, and it's great to hear from them and what they're looking at and what they haven't found yet, and then where they're leaning. And I think it's going to be New Hampshire's going to be could be a real eye opener. Could change things a little bit.
If Haley does better?
I think that.
But if she gets trounced, then
that's a whole other story. I didn't see that happening, what I saw, unless it changes in 1 week. So we'll just see.
And have you talked to the president at all recently?
No, not recently. No, we haven't. I'd love to. I'm sure we'll talk soon. Yeah. Nothing scheduled. Okay.
Fair enough.
All right.
Thanks. Nice to see you. All right. See you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
If that be all right, I know that
you have to go to committee, right?
we're working on this tax agreement, my
Go ahead.
Republican.
Ask your question.
Thanks so much. I have just one, and I want to thank the chairman and Senator Heinrich on this. Mr. Secretary, it's been a pleasure to work with you and Mr. Turk. We've seen the major automakers already making changes in their supply chains to ensure vehicles qualify for the new clean vehicle tax credit. And this, in our view, is in response to the requirements, the supply chain requirements that were in the IRA. My one question to you is, can you tell us how Treasury's rules help to implement the statute's provision here so that we can make sure that the new clean vehicle tax credit helps us with supply chains, helps us with climate, helps us with jobs? How do the rules you're working on help to implement the statute that we wrote? Secretary.
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for your leadership in drafting the IRA. What we've seen in our conversations with automakers is that they feel as if the standards set in the IRA in terms of clean vehicles and the 30D standards are tough. And that's why we've seen, as we introduced the foreign entity of concern rule, that it went from over 40 cars being eligible to only 13. What the automakers have also said is that there are achievable standards that we can use to make sure that they're domesticating the supply chain. And by making sure that any car that receives the 30D credit has to be built here in North America, it means that it is going to be built within our economy. We're building supply chain here. And in addition to 30D, 45X, and a number of the other credits will mean that not only are the cars built here, but the batteries will also be built here in America using American innovation and ingenuity. American workers, American manufacturing has led the world for decades. And because of the way that you designed the IRA, it's put us in a position where we create incentives both for American consumers who want to buy EVs, but also for American manufacturers, including auto manufacturers, to be able to compete with China by lowering the cost of the supply chain that they will need to do so. Over the last year alone, these automakers have talked about the work that they're doing to bring that supply chain back to America and to our FTA partners. And because of the work that we're doing alongside our colleagues at the Department of Energy, we're making that easier every day.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll get back to regular schedule here. Mr. Audiemo, I'm deeply concerned that Treasury is allowing taxpayers to claim Inflation Reduction Act credits in the current tax year based on proposed rules and not final rules. I cannot think of any other federal agency that operates this way, and here's my comparison. If FERC proposes a policy change, or EPA proposes a regulation, or DOE proposes a grant program, only once the proposal is final does it actually come into effect. So do you agree it's abnormal to rely on proposed rules for programs that are already in effect, like the IRA tax credits? And is Treasury using proposed rules trying to avoid legal challenges?
Senator, thank you for the question. And no, it is normal for us to do that when it comes to the tax code. You're sitting next to Chairman Wyden, who works with us on a regular basis on tax issues that are similar to this one. And outside of the IRA context, whenever you have a tax policy, we often will propose rules and allow taxpayers to rely on those proposed rules while we collect comments and finalize those rules. Our
What
goal
period-
being that we want to
I hate to,
lay out
I hate
proposals.
to interrupt you, sir. If you can just, what period of time do you concern proposed rules before acting on permanent rules? Right now, you're proposing till 2027 and beyond. We've never seen anything like this.
So we have a proposed rule out there for comment. And what we've asked for is that stakeholders like you provide us with comments that will then put us in a position to revise and provide a final rule as soon as possible. Our goal is to try and finalize these rules as quickly as possible to give taxpayers as much certainty as possible.
You can understand our concerns on this because basically you all filed for 2026, 2027, taking 2 or 3 years to get input before you make a final rule is going to put an awful lot of people who are making investments in our country in jeopardy if they based it off the way the bill was written. That's my concern, sir, and we've talked about this. We can go into more detail if we can. I want to go to Mr. Turk right now. Some U.S. automakers and battery producers have said there's just no way that we can make these EV batteries without China. And that makes no sense to me at all, since most of these technology was started here in America and then taken to China and other foreign countries of concern. So do you agree with some automakers that that's okay for U.S. tax credits to benefit these countries of concern such as China, whether it be Russia, whether it be North Korea, whether it be Iran, and others such as that we have no values with?
So I think we can absolutely do it without China. Just to give you a few numbers, we talked about the fact that graphite right now, the processing is 100% in China. Just from the investments, the tools that you've given us so far that we've used, right now our projections that 16% of the graphite that'll be used in passenger vehicles in the U.S. by 2027 will be U.S. That goes from basically 0 to 16% just with the investments we made so far, and we've got a lot more grant funding. We've got a lot more loan.
Why do you think that basically the numbers were cut in half? That these numbers were cut in half? Then why do you think they basically defied the law? Are you trying to accelerate because you think we can't do it quick enough, so you have to decelerate this to 20%?
Well, I think the way we look at it, and we work incredibly closely with our Treasury colleagues and other colleagues across the interagency, it's the tax incentives, but it's also the grant funding through the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. It's our loan program. The Defense Department has some funding as well to help on critical minerals that they're using for a graphite mine in Alaska right now. So it's all of these tools together, trying to get our percentages up as quickly as we can, understanding, as you mentioned in your opening and I mentioned in my opening, we have not had an active policy or tools in our tool belt to do anything about this.
Say one more
for
thing
so
on
many
this,
years.
if I can. My problem is this: the people that are making the investments, thinking this is what they have to hit, knowing now where the foreign competition come in unfairly and undercut them. That's where I think the lawsuits are going to come in, and it's going to be horrendous for us to be able to fight this and be uncertainty. Let me switch to something else also. I've spoken to you both about numerous times that concerns about misclassification of certain battery component production as critical minerals processing rather than manufacturing. The difference between processing, sourcing and processing versus manufacturing is very clear. We wrote it very clear in the bill. But, so my question would be, why is there a discrepancy between the two definitions? Whoever wants to speak up.
I'll start, but I think what we did was we worked very closely with our partners at DOE to develop the definition, and we borrowed in large part from the definition that was in the bipartisan infrastructure law for several reasons. One being that we wanted to provide as much certainty as
We wrote in,
possible.
I'm so sorry, Secretary. We wrote specifically what the definition was in the bill, not the bipartisan infrastructure bill, in the IRA. And you all went back and used the language to basically, I guess, solidify what you wanted to do or how you wanted to do it, or how you wanted to basically let them morph together, because sourcing and processing is a complete different than basically manufacturing. Okay, and the manufacturing is supposed to be in North America. $37.50 for one, $37.50 for the other. That's the problem.
This is our view. So, Senator, as I mentioned earlier, what we've done is we put out a proposed rule. Our goal is to take feedback from you and other stakeholders on that proposed rule. What I'm trying to explain is why we went with the proposal that we did, and our goal was to provide certainty to the marketplace by trying to make sure that we provided them with one definition of processing and manufacturing that was similar. We work closely with our partners at DOE to develop that, but we look forward to taking your feedback and feedback from other stakeholders as we move from a proposed rule to a final rule.
We're going to continue to work together to try to get back to the whole process and the definition written into the bill and not being basically interpreted differently. With that, we'll turn to Senator Barrasso.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Audio.
He does not get it.
But were you concerned about what the special counsel said about the president's
Sure,
memory?
we're all concerned. Everyone's concerned. I said, if you're picking on memory, you know, what Joe Biden said is very concerning. I understand, and people are concerned. And what Donald Trump has said, that he thought Nikki Haley was, Nancy Pelosi was very concerning, you know. And when you get a little older, you get, you know, you're not as quick as you were. We all get to that position. Anyway, the bottom line is, if we're picking on memory, we have a problem. If you're picking on character, I think it's pretty clear.
But, I mean, do you think that he can be president still, be the candidate for this party, given the concerns raised?
I think that basically that people will make that decision. You know, whatever your concerns may be, you're going to be able to express them in November election.
But what do you think? What do you think?
Isn't that part of
I'm
what
gonna
some
see a lot
Democrats
more.
are
I'm gonna
saying
see a lot.
privately, though? I mean that they think that he has lost a step. They were
I
saying
mean,
this even before this.
only thing I can tell you is I can only go from my experience. I've met with both of them before, okay, when Trump was president and President Biden now. I've never had that concern at all when I talked to either one of them. As I've spoken to President Biden here not that long ago, very good conversation, very to the point and very explicit on what we were trying to get accomplished and the differences he and I might have had on certain things. We talked about that, and it was a very good conversation. So I can only judge that. What comes across to the public is something that I can't.
I mean, voters are concerned about his age.
I understand that. I don't have that concern because I've had conversations that are very, very, I think, very productive.
But doesn't that speak to the exact issue that you say you've had
Communication.
but you've had good conversations,
Yeah.
lucid conversations
Yes.
with him, but the general public doesn't perceive that because they don't get to have those
Well,
conversations.
you're asking me a question. I can only tell you my experience.
But is that a problem?
If I didn't have that experience, the perception, I can understand the
is
perception.
it
But they should be perceived by both of them. And really, you know, what worries me more, as much of anything, is that when former President Trump has said that our NATO allies, if they're not at a certain percentage of paying into it, rather than sitting down, working with them and moving them, and most of them have moved to a direction of paying much more in.
What alarms you about Trump's comment?
That's I mean, we are the superpower of the world because, not just because of the superpower that we have as far as the military might, economic might, and everything else that the United States stands for, but we have allies around the world that'll fight with us, that believe in us and values. And I think it's the most detrimental, harmful thing that could have been said, what he's saying, to divide this country up and basically make us a nationalist. Just, that's all about us. It's not about us. It's about the world order. We have to protect our country. The border has to be protected. I've never been more deflated in what I'm seeing happen right now in Washington, and my colleagues, who I have an awful lot of respect and admiration for, and they're my friends, to tell me one thing on one day of why it needs to be done. Tell me a couple months ago saying we're not going to do anything on any aid whatsoever, and I know desperately that Ukraine needs our help. Won't even move in that direction until we do border security, which I agree with my Republican colleagues. Border security, to me, is the most dangerous thing we face as Americans. So we've talked about that. We start moving. They picked the one person who I believe is the most conservative, honorable person in the whole Senate, as one of them is James Lankford. And to put him in a position to where he was going to negotiate to make sure that was holding the line, I'm thinking, well, if James can come to an agreement, it's going to be a bill that takes care of, we talked so many times, he and I have, about catch and release, asylum, the whole thing as far as adjudication. Don't take any more in than what you can adjudicate. No one gets released into it. All the things we talked about, he got in. And all of a sudden they blew it up because of a person, Donald Trump, saying that it's not good for our country because it's not good for his election, and it'd be better for him if it didn't get, you know. The only thing I would tell you all is I think that President Biden would be grateful for our country if he would say, listen, if I made a mistake, and I did make a mistake on the border because I disagree with his border policy from day one, I made it trying to be human in a humanistic way, trying to help people around the world who are having problems. If that's his reason for doing what he did, Now, with that being said, I tried, and it was taken advantage of, and it was overrun. We can't handle it. I'm shutting it down. I think people would accept that better than not saying anything.
How do the remarks by the former president affect this debate here? Obviously, this bill's going to pass, but the change in position by some Republican senators and also influence what might happen in the House.
Well, the changing of positions right now is all political. That's what something is dangerous. I've always said this. I knew we had problems of legislating during normal situations because it's become so toxic, and politics has been weaponized. It's been weaponized to the point to where people, what side are you on? There's only one side, the American side. The Democrat and Republican side should be bringing different ideas of how to fix the same problem. It's not what's happening. So what you're doing right now, everyone's taking position on their side and defending that side, right, wrong, or indifferent. It's not who we are. And I always said we could basically come to agreement on a crisis and move forward. We've got a crisis, and I saw it break down. So I've been more discouraged. What I saw break down in the Senate with a lot of good people making votes that I knew they didn't believe, strictly because of political fear or the political persuasion or whatever it might be. So I don't know how anyone would want to serve here if you have to be subservient to somebody other than the people that elect you.
Well, you spoke to Biden. When did you speak to him?
When
did you speak to Biden? You said you spoke to him?
Yeah, I did.
When was that?
President.
Senator from West Virginia.
Madam President, I did not intend to speak on Secretary May Orcus, but I want to say a few words before I get to the content of my speech. Of course. And what I would say is this. I respectfully disagree with my colleagues, my friends on the Republican side of the aisle, and the politics that's being played. I was governor of the state of West Virginia, and I made an awful lot of appointments as far as what we call will and pleasure. I asked the state Senate to confirm people I thought would work and do a great job for the people of West Virginia. It was my responsibility. If it went wrong or did not basically fulfill their duties, that was my responsibility. If they had criminal charges brought against them, whether they're civil or criminal, then the courts would take. Then they have a right to remove. I would have been respectfully obligated to remove. And if not, they had a right to impeach. We're not there. Everyone seems to be upset that the Secretary May Orcus, which I know to be a good man, is being ostracized for doing the job he was done, that he's been basically directed to do by his boss, the President of the United States. If you're unhappy, go to the polls. It's the boss, okay? That's where it is. I think it's been a disaster. The first 2 or 3 years right now have been a disaster. And I have asked, I have begged the President to change, secure our border. It has to be secured. It's the most dangerous thing we face. And when I've said that, I said, declare a national emergency. Well, the mistakes the President has made, basically, was try to be corrected when he supported the piece of legislation we had before us about 2 or 3 weeks ago that was negotiated, a lead negotiator, which I think is one of the most honorable people we have in the Senate, is Republican, our friend James Lankford from Oklahoma, Senator Lankford. And I think it was a tremendous piece of legislation. It would give us more security at our border. It would have stopped all the illegal flow. But it was still politicized, and it didn't happen. And I think Ali Mayorkas is being blamed for that, too. I'm sorry. It was not him. And for us to go through a trial with what precious time we have left and all the challenges we have, let's just vote on securing the border. Once and for all, secure the border. Let's vote on taking care of our responsibilities around the world and at home, securing our border and helping our allies defend their own. That's what we should be doing, but everything is politicized to the point now we can't get beyond whose fault it is rather than, hey, we're Americans. If I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican, vice versa, you're not my enemy. You're my colleague who I might have differences with. We can work it out. No one wants to find that sensible middle anymore. It's a bad word, compromise. You never hear it anymore. But to blame Secretary May Orcus for you thinking he didn't do the job or what he said, the violation of the Constitution, is ridiculous. It is basically something that I can't wait to vote against and get it out as soon as it comes here. Why did they wait till next week? We could have voted on today or tomorrow. Why? They wanted to let it fester a little bit? It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. So with that being said, I would hope that we'd come to our senses and get to the real problems we have in America, and let's try to help the people who are living through some very high pricing. As far as food, the basic necessities of life are very difficult for an awful lot of people in my state of West Virginia. I'm going to do all I can to help them. But with that, this is not one way to get our job done, to waste more time on something that's so senseless.
Senator Manchin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Secretary, I was pleased to see the departments finalize the rule implementing the Jessica Grubbs Legacy Act we worked on for so long. The law reduces barriers for treating persons with substance abuse disorder by aligning the privacy laws governing the records with HIPAA, the law which governs all other health privacy records. This has allowed for medical professionals to access vital information they need to properly coordinate the care. In 2018, Congress passed a separate law in honor of Jessie Grubb's life, just called Jesses Law. This requires HHS to develop best practices standards for hospitals and doctors to display a patient's history of opioid disorder when the patient provides that information. With the implementation of the Legacy Act, it's now time to fully implement Jesses Law. So the department has finalized a rule on confidentiality of substance use disorder patient records. When will it be releasing best practices for displaying opiate use disorder in patient records?
Senator, first, thank you for the work you've done, because I don't think people recognize that in many cases, because of this, I don't want to call it an excuse, because of the difficulties with privacy laws, HIPAA privacy laws, a lot of essential information about a patient wasn't getting to the providers, and they were making the wrong decisions, especially when it related to drug addiction. And so the work that you and your colleagues have done has really helped.
Well, Senator Capito and I worked on it, but we know the family very well. It was so horrifying. This young lady had problems, and something stemmed from when she was in college, but then she was trying to get herself clean. She started running and being competitive.
Yep.
And she and her parents, who an attorney and her mother's a educator, both went with her to the hospital and says, please identify and mark my record showing it, and they forgot to do it.
Yep. And so what we're doing is we're trying to tackle that HIPAA privacy hurdle so that it doesn't become the reason the information isn't fully there. But you can understand how important it is to maintain privacy.
Oh, no, we know that. But now that we've done everything, we've went through every hoop possible.
Yep.
When will you all be doing, when can we expect it to finally be implemented?
We are now working with providers. We've developed a training module so that they understand how this can work, how they can be consistent with privacy laws, yet still include the information. So a lot of it's going to be, and we can use your help, because we need providers to start understanding what the new rules are. They're going to say to you, oh, no, we can't do that because of HIPAA privacy. We want them to understand, oh, no.
Well, I think
Jesse's
the
law
law is
makes it
very
different.
clear. Basically, it says that the patient himself and the guardians have to have permission and give you permission to do it.
Yeah.
So we thought we crossed every hurdle, crossed every T and dotted every I.
Yep.
It's just time to implement it. So I would implore you to
We're doing it.
Get your staff moving on this one here. We've waited a long time for it.
And Senator, I'm just pointing out, we need the help of the providers to make sure that they're getting their personnel to understand the new rules.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I think the quicker you put them out, the quicker they'll understand them.
absolutely.
The Health Resources and Service Administration administers grants and programs that are critical to rural health centers and clinics and hospitals. Your budget requests a $2 billion increase to this agency to carry out these programs. However, many areas of West Virginia remain unable to access these resources. West Virginia is the only state that lies completely within the Appalachian Mountain region. The United States Department of Agricultural, Economic Research Services recognize the unique topography. We're the most rugged mountainous state, east of the Mississippi. And a recent report on what we call rugged terrain. That's all been identified and how we've been classified. The report found that almost 81% of West Virginians live in a rugged area. That's compared to just 11.7% of the entire United States population. The fiscal year 2024 bill included language for HRSA to review this report to update their rural definition to better capture the uniqueness of Appalachia. Can you provide an update on this review and a timeline for when we're going to see some results so they can qualify for the needed funds they need for rural health care?
So we're not waiting. As you know, Senator, we are moving forward with a new classification, this new classification for hospitals that don't meet the critical access care definition, so that a lot of those facilities that are teetering don't go under, so they can get some additional funding. I was mentioning to Senator Capito some of the work we're doing to make further investments in behavioral health, especially in substance use. But we are absolutely prepared to work with you as you all give us some guidance about how to get into these communities that are very rural to make sure we're being as constructive as possible. We will work with the states as much as we can because they understand better what their state needs in terms of the rural health facilities. But we're trying to make sure that these new changes that you helped us put forward will help some of the states that have large rural communities address the concerns of individuals a lot faster.
Well, sir, I thank you for your service. I just want to say again, on Jesse's Law, that has been a long time in coming, okay? And the families are just hanging on needles and pins, just waiting for it to be completed. They want to save lives, and they don't want anyone to go through what they've gone through. And on the rural classification, if you want to know why the divide's becoming bigger and bigger, rural areas have been left behind. The money has not gone appropriately for the challenges they have, and that's so important.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary, for being here. I reiterate what my colleague, Senator Capito from West Virginia, we are very much getting inundated on people concerning at FAFSA. I have another problem that I have is the student debt forgiveness. First of all, we have a bill out called the Smarter Debt Act. And when people call my office, we give them 50 different variations of how they can reduce their debt without being given away. They can work it off. They get paid, but they can work their debt off. I'll give you a perfect example. All these smart young people that work in our offices, when they come here and they have a one-year contract, they get basically, we pay, since they're working, we need them here. They get paid when they're working, but then we pay also their debt commitment. After 10 years, it's totally forgiven. But you're not telling, no one's doing anything. You know how long it took us to find all 50 categories, whether it be in health professions, whether it's in public service. There are so many ways, scientific research, general repayment, everything. There's so many things, but yet we end up giving $620 billion of debt cancellation has already been implemented, including $275 billion from President Biden's new income-driven repayment, and then we're talking about doing another $750. We're spending more on giving money away than we ever did on education. It makes no sense to me at all, and you all have done nothing as the Department of Education showing me how I can take this burden off of me while I still get paid and I'm contributing to society. And we have no financial requirements whatsoever, literacy. When a student goes into the college, as I'm understanding it, you please correct me if I'm wrong, they'll go there and they say, what is your family's income? And you get the Stafford loan. So you can borrow, they said, well, you can borrow up to $12,000 with your family loan, with your family income. They might only need 6, but they'll take all 12. And then most of them, majority fall out in 2 years. They think it's all free money because they have no payments at all. There's no accrued interest whatsoever. But when it comes time to pay the piper, it hits them hard because we don't require any financial literacy on the front end. This is stupid. And we just keep piling it on like there's no end to it. Your debt is $34.5 trillion and growing every day. And we're not going to be able to burden this education. And we're dumbing down on top of that. Students aren't getting any better. And how about the kids that don't go to school? In our little state, there's an awful lot of kids that can't go to school. They come to us and say, you mean I'm working and paying my taxes and you're giving it away to people who went to college and had a good time? And now they don't want to pay it back? Had a better chance for an opportunity? Don't want to pay it back? We've got to answer. You want to know why the rural America and urban and rural America is getting further and further apart? Is because rural America is being left behind and getting screwed. That's exactly why. So, sir, I don't know what in the hell you all are doing, but this makes no sense to me. If you would just take a look at our Smarter Debt Act, we put it all together for you. It'll be able, you could put it on your website tomorrow and start showing people how to take the burden of high student loan debt off of their back by giving services back that we need in so many areas of our government, so many areas of our country. Everyone needs it, every state, but you all don't do it. Did you know about what we're talking about, the Smarter?
Thank you for your comments, sir. And I think we share the opinion that higher education has been out of reach for too many people and that we have a broken system. We're proud of the work that we're doing to provide teachers who are making $35,000 a year debt relief after 10 years of service in public service. So we're committed to working with you and others. This, to me, is about that teacher that I spoke to recently who has $60,000 in loans because the interest compounded it. She took out a $30,000 loan and is now owing $60,000, making under $40,000. The system is broken, and what we're trying to do is fix it. The bipartisan bill.
Why don't we just educate a person that basically when they take the debt out, when they sign up for the Stafford loan that they think is free money, it's not free money. Explain to them what their budget. So they have a budget when they go to college. This is your budget. Mm-hmm. But you tell a kid that they get $12,000, I guarantee they'll have a nice apartment and end up buying a car.
The folks that we're providing debt relief to, sir, are public servants or veterans that have served our public and have done it not to become rich, but to make their community better. People who have been taken advantage of by universities or colleges.
I agree with all that.
So we're trying to fix a system to make higher education more affordable.
You have to you're the education department.
Right.
You have to educate people on what's available.
Right.
The education of basically the congressionally authorized student loan forgiveness programs. It's out there. 50 different categories where a student can say, oh, I'm going to go in this education. I'm going to work over here. I'm going to go in health. I'm going to go in scientific research. And I'll go work over there because that takes care of my debt. They're paying for my college tuition. But no, they go out and whatever happens, because they have no idea, it comes back to roost on them. And I don't know. I'm done.
Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Chairwoman Baldwin and Ranking Member.
Mr. Chairman. Senator Manchin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Secretary, thank you for being here, and thank you for always connecting, corresponding, and getting back with us on different concerns we might have together. I appreciate very much the attention from your office and yourself especially. The Biden administration would like to say that bipartisan infrastructure law provided $7.5 billion to build out a network of EV chargers in this country, but that's really not accurate. And I wanted to go over why, because I know we wrote the bill the way we did. Your department's responsible for allocating 2.5 of that funding through the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant Program to strategically deploy publicly accessible refueling infrastructure along designated corridors and other accessible locations. While EV charging is eligible for this funding, it is not the only technology that there is. We were very clear in the bill about that. Hydrogen, propane, and natural gas fueling infrastructure are also eligible, which is why I include an amendment in the Senate's markup of the fiscal year 24 transportation appropriation bill last year that directs your department to give fair and full consideration to each eligible technology and not to restrict awards to just EV charging infrastructure. Unfortunately, of the 47 awards provided under the program so far, all but four, 43 of them, and all but four have been exclusively 43 of them for EV charging. So I just get your assurance that you are looking or understanding how the bill was written and the purpose of the bill. And if you're trying to correct that or looking at the inequality of how this distribution is going.
Thank you, and I can assure you that in reviewing applications, the department is always taking care to make sure that it conforms to statute, including those that creates those eligibilities for these chargers. I think the bulk of the successful grant applications have been electric for the same reason that the bulk of private sector investment in alternative fuel for light-duty vehicles has been on the electric vehicle charging, but any program from the Alternative Fuel Corridor Program to CFI that has an inclusive definition where EVs are eligible, but EV charging is eligible, but not the only thing that's eligible. We will apply that faithfully and judge every application based on its merits and its conformity to statute.
The thing I mean, just if your people would consider in rural areas where you might have challenges from the grid and electrical capacity and things of that sort, and the larger trucks, they're not going that direction. They're looking at hydrogen for long hauling. They got the horsepower, they got the ability to do it, and they're very clean. But we never have, and we're having a hard time getting hydrogen going because I've got to be honest with you, the administration's a little bit lackluster on how we make hydrogen and things of this sort. But I can tell you it's the fuel of the future as far as the heavy trains, even planes, but definitely trucks. And fueling stations in remote areas, Montana, Wyoming, all the west, and areas like we have mountainous things of that, electric just doesn't do it. So if you could consider the terrain you're dealing with and the locations you're dealing with the alternative fuel sources, it would help tremendously, Mr. Secretary. Also, I'd like to I know you've been very helpful on Corridor H. Corridor H in going through West Virginia. President Johnson, as part of the Appalachian Development Highway System, 1965. We've been trying to connect this since 1965. We're getting close. You all been great. We're almost there. We need your commitment to finish this damn thing. And so I hope it's high on your radar screen, and I know you have some tremendous staff that understands West Virginia very well, sitting behind you, that understands it, lives in that part of the state of West Virginia, that understands how desperately we need that. And the I-81 connection would be unbelievable, sir.
Thanks. Of course, we're very mindful of the importance of Corridor H and the entirety of the ADHS, and we'll continue to work on that with the resources and eligibilities that we have.
I know. And then also, the ticket agents. Remember, we've been working on ticket agents. You helped us get it back. in West Virginia, we say the New River Train, and expand the rail service that keeps the state connected to the rest of the nation. Only thing that we're asking for, the agency was thankful that the agency granted $500,000 to Amtrak this past December. Without that $500,000 dedication that you put towards Amtrak, we would have not kept those systems that we have. What we have right now is we have the Capital Limited, which runs through the Eastern Panhandle, and the Cardinal, which runs from New York City to Chicago, both traversing our southern borders, southern part of our state. The Summit Bechtel National Scout Reserve has been blessed by this, the state capitol in Charleston, Marshall University in Huntington. It's truly a lifeline, and people are using the rail more than ever before. We made upgrades into our stations to handle the, truly treat the passengers in a much more friendly atmosphere. So with that, the stakeholders in West Virginia, we're working to restore a 7-day-a-week service on the critical transportation route to my state. If you all would look into that, we would be deeply grateful for that, because I think it justifies it.
Thank you.
I don't know how much you all know about that, but are you finding there's more of an uptick on train traffic?
There's certainly more and more interest and excitement in passenger rail. As you know, my boss is all about it, and we're doing everything we can to deliver both restored service and reliability.
How's the high-speed thing? How's the high-speed working? I've been watching that, and I think you're about California and Nevada, Las Vegas.
Yeah, it was a great day. We were able to break ground on that. They aim to have that train in service by 2028. It would mark the first high-speed rail service in revenue on U.S. soil, and I believe the first time an American passenger
Is there
buys
any,
a ticket, there's no
real
going
quick,
back.
if I may, Mr. Chairman, on that, Mr. Secretary, I looked at that and I thought, that one route, that one train has a chance to be revenue neutral if you can, revenue making. Do you all see any forecast that it can pay for itself once we have the investment made?
Obviously, we're investing in that capital side, but
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why you see a private player building that is they believe in the extraordinary revenue potential there. And while every market's different, every line is different, that's one that seems especially well suited.
So we're not obligated to maintain it and take care of it and everything as far as after the capital
we
investment?
made a capital grant of $3 billion and then another loan, but that's really about the capital side. It'll be up to the business to operate it.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Appreciate it very much. Thank you, Senator. And to follow up on that, is there a penalty for is there any penalty in the law or the rule that basically if you don't basically allow the leases to happen in a timely fashion, any retribution to the department? Not aware of, maybe that's our problem. Okay, Secretary Holland, I alluded in my statement, your request of a budget increase of $935 million or 5% increase over last year's. I also see your proposed budget expects Interior will collect nearly $700 million less in bonuses, rents, and royalties because you all have chosen to have less lease sales and discourage production on public lands and waters. It's really kind of hard to justify to the taxpayers why we should be using tax dollars to increase the budget for the Department of Interior $935 million when you have the ability to collect this and be self-sustaining, but you've reduced it by $700 million. So I'd like to hear y'all's concerns about that, or that's a $1.6 billion swing.
Thank you, Chairman. The fiscal year 2024 estimate was recently updated and increased $3.3 billion from last year's projection. Both the fiscal year 2025 and fiscal year 2024 estimates reflect an overall upward revenue trend, and differences between 2025 and 2024 reflect lower OMB price assumptions for oil and gas and lower offshore bonus amounts for 2025.
So you agree that there's going to be less coming in, the $700 million you agree with is less revenue coming in because of a reduction of I think you're saying reduction of the prices and the royalties you would get, or just the leases that we have and the money we receive from the leases?
Chairman, the estimates reflect a point in time and can change quickly based on assumptions and events. For instance, the price of oil affects the royalties companies pay, and that can actually fluctuate.
You'd all have to agree that having less lease sales is going to affect that greatly. I mean, we'd have to acknowledge that because that's just it's just common sense. The other question I have, in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, Congress gave you a statutory deadline to issue a final offshore carbon capture and storage regulations by November 22. okay? November 22, we're 2 years down the road. You missed that deadline and continue to delay each year. All the science tells us we cannot meet our climate goals without carbon capture sequestration. And given the administration's focus on decarbonization, this initiative should be a top priority, which we made it a top priority in about every piece of legislation that we had done, yet a draft rule has not even been published yet. So when do you think you will publish a proposed rule for comment, since we're 2 years behind already?
Chairman, thank you for the question. And as you can imagine, creating a new regulatory program for a new applied technology is creating, it's very technical and it's very complex. We want to make sure we're doing a good job. We're consulting with the industry, with other government agencies and countries to ensure efficient and comprehensive process. We don't have an actual estimated time for this to be completed, but I want to assure you that we are working on it.
How much CO2 has a 3-year delay that's been left unsequestered? I mean, do you have any idea how much is out there that we're not sequestering? That we could?
I couldn't answer that at the moment, but of course, we would be happy to give you a status update on where we are with this, and know that our scientists.
Let me make it very clear that the people that are producing records amount today and makes us more energy secure than ever before. You know, that we produced 38 trillion cubic feet of gas, 4.7 billion cubic feet, billion barrels, 4.7 billion barrels of oil last year. We produced 14 billion cubic feet of LNG. We did more solar and more battery storage than ever before. So it's an all-in energy process that we have. I've just tried to make the rational evaluation that we are all understanding there's a transition coming, and we have to be part of that transition. And gas and oil and all of this, but we have to do it cleaner and better, and we can. But if the administration is fighting us on sequestration, then it's an oxymoron saying we can't do that because you're still putting out CO2 because you won't give us, we can't get Class 6 well permits. We have 128 pending. Only 2's been provided. Yet we're willing to go ahead and start collecting fines on companies that are still producing CO2 because they can't get a permit. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We're fighting our own selves of energy security, and we're not going to be able to switch for the public. There's no way that we can switch before we have something that'll do exactly what dispatchable fossil is doing, 24/7 production of energy. That's just common sense too. For the superpower of the world, for the rest of the world's security that we have and our allies are depending on it. And every time we displace Venezuela, I think we've gone back and forth on Venezuelan oil, and now with still turning a blind eye to the ghost ships coming out of Iran that uses their profits to support Hamas and his terrorist operations around the world. It just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever why we would be doing that when we produce it in the Gulf cleaner than anyone. So if we displace by producing more, it's good for the environment. But we're having a hard time. And finally, I have, last month the BLM published a final rule that authorized BLM to grant restoration and mitigation leases to third parties, restricts development in potentially environmentally sensitive areas on public lands, allows BLM to waive fair market value if the leases would further other policy priorities identified by BLM. Grazing, mining, and non-renewable and renewable energy stakeholders all oppose the proposed rule. How much public land do you expect to restrict from development under this new rule?
Senator, I couldn't tell you the specific amount of acreage, but I can tell you that fair market value will apply to the restoration and mitigation leases that we're moving forward.
Well, we would like to have an answer on two things. Okay, how much do you think that's going to restrict, and how much public land do you expect you will lease without charging fair market value, which has been historical with BLM?
We'll take those questions back, Senator, or Chairman, and consult with you.
With that, Senator Hoeven, we're so glad.
Thank you. Senator Manchin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Secretary, for being here. Recently, the President vetoed a bipartisan congressional resolution overturning the National Labor Relations Board NLRB rule, redefining who is a joint employer. The rule from NLRB will put the franchise model at risk, and I think you know how I feel about this. Small businesses are the heart of the economy in our communities, especially in our little state of West Virginia, which we love dearly, where more than 98% of our businesses are small businesses. 1 out of every 3 franchise owners say they wouldn't own a small business without the franchise business model. That's a tremendous, 1 in 3, 33%. The last time NLRB tried this study, a study found that the policy led to 376,000 fewer jobs and $33 billion in lost output across the economy. Well, a federal judge has currently blocked this rule from taking effect. I'm concerned what will happen if it does take effect. So my question would be, there continues to be bipartisan concern with what the NLRB is proposing. What does your department plan to do to curb the job and economic output loss we experienced the last time, if this would go into effect, and are you all still pushing it for it to be effective?
So, Senator, it's nice to see you. I know everybody knows, but I will say this. The NLRB is a separate entity from the Department of Labor. The joint employer rule is not something that the Department of Labor has pursued or that we have put on our regulatory agenda. I will say, one of the things—
We tried to get rid of it, but the president he vetoed us. The president overrode us. You know, we tried to get rid of it, but he vetoed it. So he must believe, and the administration must believe in the rule the way the rule's been.
Yeah, that is not a rule that the Department of Labor pursued or put into effect. I will say those—
Do you acknowledge the job? Can you acknowledge the job losses that came when they did implement it the last time?
I mean, Senator, I don't have any data about that, but I will acknowledge the conversations we have had and the important role that franchisees and franchisors played. I know we've talked about this too.
Sure.
My own parents owned a franchisee business, and so I understand and have lived the benefits that such a business creates for—
If you would do me a favor with your able staff here, if they would just check and find out if that's accurate, the amount of jobs that we know have been lost before, or our statistics show us, and the amount of revenue it's caused to our economy, then maybe that would make the president and his administration take a different look at this in a different way. We're very hopeful.
I mean, Senator, I know you know this, but since the president came into office, 15.4 million jobs have been added to the economy, at the same time that the unemployment rate remains very low. It's been under 4% for 27 months straight. I know that's already been said as well. So we are in a moment of tremendous job creation, in no small part due to the investments that are being made through the president's Investing in America agenda, which this body was obviously very critical in helping to make possible.
The bills that we all passed in a bipartisan way, and even the IRA bill, the way it's being implemented is different than the way we wrote it. So there's going to be a lot of legal cases that they're going to lose, because they're overstepping their boundary of how they're implementing. And I've said this many, many times. You're trying to implement a bill you never passed. I know the bills because we wrote them. We all worked on them. We wrote the bills. We know what they are in them. And they're expanding those to a position that it's going to exasperate the position we've taken. Bring manufacturing back to America. You can't bring manufacturing back if you relax the rules on where you get your critical minerals and where you produce them. And if you allow China to keep doing, all you're doing is promoting China's dominance in the market. One final question was this. Department of Labor's Schedule A shortage occupation list was designed to address workforce shortages by streamlining the process of hiring vetted international workers in high-demand industries like science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM, and also healthcare. Schedule A is an important tool that exempts workers in understaffed industries from bureaucratic visa hurdles and backlogs. Despite having the authority to revise the Schedule A list, the department has not updated it to include more than 2 specific occupations, professional nurses and physical therapists since 2005. While the department has not updated the list in over 20 years, I was pleased to see the request for information, RFI, on how the Schedule A occupation list could be modernized to include STEM occupations for which there is a demonstrated labor shortage. So what is the department's timeline to provide an updated on Schedule A list? I'm glad you are taking it serious.
Yes, so that's what I was going to say. We did do an RFI on this to figure out exactly what we needed to do, and I can certainly get back to you more with the timeline. I thought, Senator, you were going to ask me about a rule that you had wanted to get done that we did get over the finish line, which is I was in Uniontown, Pennsylvania recently to announce our silica rule, which is going to save thousands of lives and prevent thousands of injuries
Let me
for mine
thank you for
workers,
that.
but we didn't get to talk about it.
I'm so sorry. I want to thank you for that because it did help. Thank you. Thank you. My commitment to my great country has been doing everything I can to make sure that we can survive as a representative form of democracy, a government that we have that the people are in control of, not the party systems. And today, for me to be able to fulfill that, I have changed my registration to being a no party affiliation independent. My reason for that, I can speak to both sides without having a brand, if you will. The brands have gotten so bad. If you have a D by your name, a Democrat, you're supposed to hate Republicans. If you have an R by your name, you're supposed to hate Democrats. I don't hate either one, and they're not our enemies. Each one are not the enemy. We need to come together as a country, making sure that both parties have opportunities to bring the best ideas to fix the problems that we all face. We can do that, but only as one country. The American brand is the brand that I carry the proudest, and I will always do that. I'm able to do that more by being a registered, no party affiliate independent than having a D or an R by my name. So I look forward to working with you in the future. I look forward to being involved in trying to help people understand how we can fix a broken system that the political parties have taken control of. I'm going to continue with the questioning now, if I may. You want to go ahead and restart? But anyway, good to have you. Thank you for your service. And first of all, I want to talk about the Bureau of Fiscal Service and Management as far as the office in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Okay? The employees are not coming back to work. Now, I know that Senator Romney and I have introduced a piece of legislation that would say that at least 60% of the time they have to be in their office at work, okay? And I think that basically a relatively small increase above the 50% mark mandated by the Office of Management and Budget. OMB has said 50% of the time. I don't know if you know this or not, but that office in Parkersburg, West Virginia, people only have to be there 2 days of pay period. 2 days of pay period. What they end up doing, they come at the end of the first pay period, stay 2 days. The beginning of the second pay period, stay 2 days. There are 4 days out of a total of 2 pay period. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, and it's destroying the economy and the people that should be coming to work. They're living anywhere and ever. They fly in. And this has got to stop. And you have to stop it, Madam Secretary, because it's not going to happen unless you clamp down tight. The rules say, OMB, at least 50%. We'll accept 50%. At least I get them there 10 days out of 20, okay?
I appreciate the problem that this is causing, and I know that you've written a letter to Treasury
well, we have specifics now we can help you all with. And now my next round is going to be, I want to be as respectful as I can because I totally disagree with what you all are doing, implementing the EV credits. The EV credits, electric vehicle credits. I know that because we wrote the bill. My committee wrote the bill completely.
I know.
And we wrote the intent of the bill. We have all the findings of what we did and how we did it. But let me just show this right here, Madam Secretary. The bill was very much written so that we would bring America back, bring manufacturing back to America, that we would not be relying on unreliable supply chains, especially the countries of 4 concerns, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. And as we know, China has dominated the critical minerals industry. But here's what you all have done. Your permanent rules, these are your permanent rules, came from y'all. This is how we wrote the bill. It's in the bill, specific. First year, 2023, 40%. You all cut it in half to 20.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Okay, this is here.
See that.
This is 40%.
What is 40? What is 40?
Let's get it up there closer. You can see how it does, okay? First year, second year, third year. You've cut everything in half. Everything in half. It makes no sense because you're going to get sued on all of this from people who have been damaged. The manufacturers that are investing money that thought that they would not be inundated with lower prices, unfair competition, especially from China, you've given them the ability to come after them now. Okay, you can see this all the way through.
So why do you think we've cut this in half? You're talking about the requirements.
The requirements of what should be from
batteries and battery components.
Processing.
And for
mineral sourcing and processing. You've even tried to change the definition of processing to where some of the manufacturing can be done and considered in processing. You've done that. We have all of that. The only thing I'm trying to be very respectful. You are going to be sued. And we're going to do a writ of mandamus, amicus brief, to help the people that are suing because this is how we wrote the bill. We wanted it to be America. We wanted it to be with free trade agreement countries. We wanted not to be reliant on China. This absolutely allows China in the market and staying in the market for the entire extent of the IRA.
I'm sorry, you know, we put out the FIAC restrictions that pertain to China, and those restrictions mean that this year you can't have battery components that are made in China, and next year a vehicle.
Why did you cut it in half then? Why did you cut it in half?
Cut what?
You cut basically the requirement of how much had to come from where. This had to come from America free trade agreements. This can come from non-free, anywhere else in the world. This is what's happening. I can go into it in detail, but this is, I have been raising absolutely holy Cain from day one. Now, we wrote the IRA as a very balanced bill to have energy. As far as basically, if we're going to basically change our entire transportation mode, it's the first time in the history of the United States of America we cannot basically provide all the components for a transportation mode. We're willing to be reliant on, especially of China, which had a total lock on the EVs.
We share the objective that you have, which is to rid ourselves of dependence on China.
Who on your staff changed this in half,
and
I would say?
I'm not sure. I think we need to have a technical discussion
We've
of
been
this
calling you about,
because
anybody here, any of you all work on this?
Because I believe that the rules we wrote are in accord with what's in the statute.
And again, I'm trying to be as respectful as I can. They absolutely are not. And I am encouraging every manufacturer to sue you.
Well,
and I will do the amicus brief on behalf, and we'll show you exactly how we wrote the bill, the intent of the bill, and you'll lose every suit. I know that. So in order to avoid all of that, why can't we just basically implement the bill the way it was written? And I've said this, you all, and basically the administration, and these are people I've known forever, you're trying to implement a bill you never passed. This is not the BBB. This is the IRA.
Well, we shared the objective that you had in writing the bill.
I know.
And I believe we have implemented it in accordance with what's in the law.
Senator Coons, based on the hydrogen hub, okay? Now, let me explain. The hydrogen hub, we wrote that in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and then we came back and funded it in the IRA. This is how we wrote. This is how we wrote the bill. This is how we wrote it. We're happy to share all this with you. I think, hopefully, some of your staff knows this. Where did additionality come in? Where did time matching come in? Where did regionality come in? Who made that up?
Well,
we never had one iota of a word in that written. We wrote the bill. And then all of a sudden, these are the conditions to get the credits. Now, with that, where's the other? Let me show you this one. This is from the 7 hubs. Every one of the hubs have written to you all. Now, can you have the California hub and the West Virginia hub that agree? Something's wrong. We must be on the right track. But you all, every hub to agree said it's no longer commercially viable if you do what you're doing, implementation of the hydrogen rules. This is what we're dealing with. It's killing us. We shouldn't be fighting within ourselves. Just implement, write the rules the way the bill was intended to write. We wrote it.
Well, the hydrogen rule has to abide by the Clean Air Act definition of life cycle emissions.
The whole thing is basically what...
And that means taking account of indirect emissions, which is where the complications come into play.
This administration doesn't want anything that comes out of the ground. I'm fighting them tooth and nail. We're producing more energy than ever in the history of the United States of America. If it wasn't for that, your inflation would be sky high, the prices of gas would be at $5. And what we're doing, because we're using blue hydrogen, is where they're going nuts on. That's it. But you're going to have it in this mix, or we will not be energy independent.
We recognize that there's an issue with respect to the hydrogen hubs, and we've asked explicitly in the guidance we put out how people suggest addressing it. We're reviewing the comments.
I'm out of time, but I would love to sit down. We're trying to give you the benefit of the doubt in so many things, trying to work with you, but it just seems that's impossible because they're hell-bent on implementing things that were never intended in the bill and were not written in the IRA or any of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. and we're going to continue to fight to make sure that that you confirm,
Well, I would like to have
we'd be happy to do that, ma'am.
understand why you think we've halved.
Well, we can definitely show you word by word. And I hope that whoever's in this audience with you right now, or whoever wrote some of these things, I would like to have them in the room too.
Yes, I agree.
All righty. I'm sorry.
Matt,
This morning, the committee is convening to conduct oversight of the Bureau of Land Management, also known as BLM, which is situated within the Department of the Interior. I'd like to welcome Director Stone Manning back to the committee, and thank you for joining us this morning. I also sit on the Armed Services Committee, which you know, and that's where I'm going to be going to. Though West Virginia has very little BLM managed lands as compared to other states, as chairman of this committee, and as an American, I'm always astonished at how much land in the United States is managed by the federal government, especially in the western states. My sympathy to all of you.
Thank you.
In total, the BLM is responsible for more than 1 in every 10 acres of land in the United States, and approximately 30% of the nation's minerals. That's approximately 245 million acres of surface land and 700 million acres of subsurface mineral estate. This land, together with all the natural resources and beauties, is owned by the American people, and it has been entrusted to the BLM to sustain its health, diversity, and productivity for the use and enjoyment of present and future generations. This includes managing wildfires and drought and protecting and restoring watersheds, native and recreational fisheries, and ecosystems across BLM-managed lands. BLM also plays a significant role in providing for our nation's energy and mineral security. Roughly 10% of U.S. oil and gas production occurs on BLM-managed lands. In fiscal year 23, we produced 516 million barrels of oil from federal onshore lands, 3.7 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. This is why it is so important that the Inflation Reduction Act ensured onshore oil and gas leasing will continue by tying BLM's authority to issue rights-of-way for solar and wind projects to whether substantial oil and gas lease sales are also occurring in public lands. And really what it's about is an all-in energy policy, using everything we have in the cleanest fashion. And we're producing this energy more cleanly than ever while also addressing the legacy impact on our energy communities through initiatives like the $4.7 billion of Congress provided in the infrastructure law for the Orphan Well program, which is managed by the BLM. I was also pleased to see the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals earlier this year finally overturn the executive branch's decade-long moratorium on new federal coal leasing, giving that nearly 40% of our nation's coal comes from the Powder River Basin in Wyoming and Montana, much of its BLM-managed lands. But unfortunately, the BLM quickly followed that up by choosing no more coal leasing as their preferred option on those federal lands. I guess when you look at the regulations this administration is putting out, it's clear they think that coal won't be needed anymore, which I disagree with, respectfully. But I'm here to tell you what it's actually doing is putting our grid reliability at risk right now. And the problems aren't limited to fossil fuels. The administration doesn't want to talk about that. There's nearly a 300-mile transmission project across Oregon and Idaho that has been trying for over 18 years to get permitted and constructed. When complete, the 500 kilovolt line would deliver badly needed energy and increase reliability to the nation's electric grid. But just when the developer thought they were about to cross the finish line, BLM decided to restart the previously completed cultural and historical surveys. I've heard similar challenges with geothermal developers, where nearly 30% of their capital is tied to just environmental reviews. They simply cannot afford to be stuck in the endless permitting nightmare while their remaining financial support rides on whether they can ever obtain a permit to start their commercial operations to produce geothermal energy. To show how bad the problem is, this chart behind me is based on work from Stanford University and looked at every single environmental impact statement completed from 2010 to 2018 across the entire federal government. The BLM led more of these EISs than any other agency. Stanford found that solar is the most frequently litigated and canceled project type, with wind a close second in terms of cancellation. In almost all of these cases, the litigants were environmental groups. As evidenced by the research from Stanford, comments submitted to BLM's regulations and feedback I've heard directly from developers, and it is clear there remains a major challenging permitting energy projects on BLM-managed lands, regardless, and I say that again, regardless of the type of energy that will be produced. Unfortunately, the situation for critical minerals on public lands is just as bad. Put that up again, if you will. I don't know if kind of moving around, if you all have been able to see where it's coming from, what's been litigated and what's been canceled. And it's astonishing, and I think people don't realize we all need permitting reform. And some people think, well, it helps one group more than the other, and it really doesn't. It basically levels the playing field so we can have reliable energy and a grid system that works. Some estimates say that more than 300 new mines will be needed in order to meet projected demand for critical minerals. According to the International Energy Agency, demand for electricity vehicle batteries will increase from around 340 gigawatt hours today to over 3,500 gigawatt hours by 2030, requiring as many as 50 new lithium mines, 41 new nickel mines, and 11 new cobalt mines. This demand simply cannot be met through recycling alone, and new mines must be built in the U.S. and on BLM-managed lands. We directed the BLM in the bipartisan infrastructure law to provide us with a report on how we can do that and how we can improve and expedite the permitting around our domestic critical mineral supply chain. The report we received, which was many months late, recognized the hard truth that demand for critical minerals will at least double by 2040, but then it clearly failed to meet the requirements set by Congress. It barely contained any concrete recommendations to actually accelerate mine permitting. Instead, it calls for more regulations, more staff, more funding, less mining, wherever BLM believes permitting will take longer, and multi-year effort to completely overhaul the entire mining regulatory system. The report was so bad, in fact, that Interior's own Inspector General found the department failed to meet Congress's direction and instructed Interior to provide the additional legally required information. We really need you to do better. Director Stone Manning, I fully appreciate your responsibility to manage our nation's precious resources. I also implore you not to forget your role in our nation's economic and energy security. Now I'm going to recognize Senator Brasso for his opening statement.
I don't have anything to say about that. I think we ought to wait this week and see what happens this week, let it unfold. There's a lot of senators that want to talk to each other, and we're just coming back, from 4th of July, which I enjoyed with my grandchildren and had a good time, and just see what happens. Listen,
what would you want to see out of the next week?
Well, just, the senators who are up for election, they're going to have a lot of input. I'm anxious to hear from them and anxious to hear from their conversation with the president, if they've had that. And we'll just see what happens. I think this week is going to play out. I think everyone just calms down a little bit and waits for this week. My main concern was the health and well-being of the president. He said everything's fine, so let's see how that goes.
Do you think the election is winnable for President Biden at this point?
Oh, I think it's winnable, sure. I do. And I've always said, Donald Trump is a threat to democracy as we know it. So I think people are taking that very seriously, and yeah, you can't call the race now. I mean, this is ridiculous. This early for people to get so excited. The bottom line is just wait till this week, give it another week. It's only been a week and 3 days, 3 or 4 days?
You said give it another week, so are you keeping an open mind on whether you want to see the president step aside in this race?
My thing is to find out what direction that the president is going to go. He's said very clearly what he wants to do and what he will do.
What do you want to see from him?
Well, I think that basically, we'll see he's very active now and everything. That's good.
Has it been enough for you the past couple of days?
He's getting very active, and that's good.
Are you?
There's nothing that can be said other than for everyone to start calling for the end of whatever is wrong. I think basically right now we should be looking at how this unfolds this week. We're coming back first time for 10 days, and senators are in tough re-election. They're in cycles. We'll see what they have to say. Anxious to hear from them. Anxious to hear from leadership what they have to say. We have a meeting at 5. And all will be discussed. And
just sounds like you're keeping an open mind on the path forward.
You have to. I've always had an open mind. That's why I'm an independent.
But are you personally confident that he has what it takes to not only continue this election, but then to serve for another 4 years?
Well, I think that if you just wait until this week and there'll be more comes out, I believe that we'll be able to have a better, clear view of what's happening. His health and well-being, I think, should be everyone's first and foremost concern. His and his families and all of us. And he's fine. The doctors are saying he's fine, so I'm going to take that for its word and go from there. So I'm just going to wait. I really am.
What did you
make you regret not running for president yourself when you saw this?
It's difficult. The difficult situation is that the pathway forward, because of the party system and the process that we have, makes it very challenging. No matter what you want to do, what your entire desire may be. My concern is about the country. It's where we stand as a country. Where do we stand in the world standings? Where the superpower of the world, the rest of the world is looking at us. And we've always been able to right our ship whenever people think and they can count us out. So I feel the strength of America will still come through.
it'll come through loud and clear.
Do you agree with the president's approach in his letter this morning, saying this debate has been had and no more discussion on the nominee?
I haven't seen any of that, so that's what I'm saying. We're just getting back. I just got into town.
What about the president's interview? You've had a number of Democrats that have raised some concerns with the president, saying that only the Lord Almighty can convince him to step aside, or even that he would be okay if Donald Trump won as long as he gave it his best.
Things have been said in 1 week, and just in all of the rush of getting statements out and all that, and I've just sat back and I said, let's wait. Let's see, let it unfold, give it a couple weeks to mature. Whatever's going to happen will happen. The president has set a course of where he wants to go. I think he has earned that right. He has a heck of a legacy right now with all the service he has, and just give it time. I think this week is going to be a crucial time, and this week I think it'll tell you an awful lot. You have senators here for 3 or 4 days talking to each other, and I'm sure they'll be talking to the White House. Those who are up for re-election, I think they have concerns, and they're valid. And the president can get out there and talk, and he can have some town hall meetings and just let free-for-all go to town hall meetings and show that he has that ability. I love that. I think there's a lot of good things will happen.
There was some reporting that you were ready to call on him to step aside right after the debate, but
I don't know
you
where
got
that
talked
came
out of
from.
it.
No one ever talked me out. I've never been talked out of anything. That's exactly why I'm an independent.
If President Biden does withdraw, is Kamala Harris the person that should take the helm
I
for
think that
Democrats?
basically that's a hypothetical question, which I'm not going to get into. But I think that the Democrats, the Democratic Party, will have to make a decision of how open they want it to be, what direction they want to go, and what face they want to put forward. That'll be up to them, and I think that whatever happens will happen. But they'll make that decision at the time. And there's still plenty of time. I mean, everyone's excited right now, but another week is not going to change anything. It really isn't. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks for stopping, sir.
A number of your colleagues yesterday said that they didn't think Biden could win in your lunch. Do you think that Biden can win?
Well, no, I think the discussions we had was very, very detailed, and everyone stated what they believed, and I appreciate that and respect that. I'm not going to repeat anything that was said there. I think the concerns is the health and well-being of our president. That was more concerning than anybody else, anything else that was discussed. It's all about him, okay, from the standpoint, and he has to make the decision. It's his decision to be made. And I think, and you've heard Nancy Pelosi this morning and different people talking. So the bottom line is that he has a tremendous legacy.
But he says he's made his decision.
Well, if his decision is made, that is what it is then we have to move on. When I'm saying move on, the president's going to be the nominated Democratic Party, and do you want the Democrat values to a certain extent, or do you want a Donald Trump who maybe could challenge all those values that we have right now? And the bottom line is people make their decision on that.
You know what it's like, though, to run in a tough race, to run in a red state. I mean, is Biden going to be a drag on the ticket for people like Tester and Brown and Baldwin?
That's what I've said. Let this week play out. This is the first time we've heard from them. Okay, those who are on the hot seat, if you will, in the states that are very challenging. And they'll make those decisions based on, is it harming them or hurting them, or is it for the betterment of the cause or whatever. And maybe there's no change. Maybe it doesn't make a difference. I don't really know. That's why I kept saying, let's wait till the week before people start asking. The president's been a friend of mine for a long time, as you know. And I respect what he's been able to do, and we've been respectfully able to agree to disagree on times. And he knows my concerns, and I think his administration is taking him too far to the left. I want to see the old Joe I've known forever, that middle deal maker, if you will, and that's what we're looking for.
Have you talked to the president?
I have not. I intend to, but I haven't.
Okay. You're trying to set up some time to talk to him?
I'll talk to him. I've always done that. He's always been accommodating to that.
Do you see a world in which it may be advantageous for some Democrats who are running in tough states or tough districts to distance themselves from the president?
No, I think basically they'll have a stronger voice right now because the president has respect for everyone that puts their name on the ballot. I know that. So he'll be looking at that and the difficulties they're having and challenging, and then they'll make their point. And that's why I said they're the persons they need to hear from. Those are who the president needs to hear from. The congressional people in tough seats, senators in tough seats, if they can hold on or not hold on, if it's helping or harming, they'll make all those decisions. I think the president will accept that and look at it and evaluate it and see if it's accurate or not.
Do you see a world in which the president would change his mind at this point, though?
I've always said this: if you can't change your mind, you can't change anything. Everyone, if they see facts and they feel, that the right decision is the right decision, and they want to make that right decision, even though they made some overtures other than that. I've always believed rational people do the right thing.
What is Schumer's message to you guys right now?
No, I think Schumer's been very clear. He's supporting Joe Biden. He's supporting Joe Biden. Okay, that's all I can tell you.
You don't see a world in which, like, a group of 20 Democratic senators send a letter to Biden saying he should get out of the race. You don't think that's going to happen?
Well, I don't see that accumulating right now. I think there's other people that have concerns, and they've spoken that, and they'll make public. I'm not going to say what they've said, but they'll make it public to you if they wish to.
Thank you.
Senator Manchin joins me now for his first TV interview since Biden announced he's dropping out of the race. That was a lifetime ago, Senator.
Good morning, Casey. How are you?
Good morning. I am well.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing this.
Sure
So, Senator, are you running for president?
Well, let me just put it this way. The calls and everything that's coming in is not quite sure unless they see a process where they really are. As things change any at all, and a coordination doesn't always basically produce, I think, the strongest, if you will, the strongest team. Very well, Kamala could be that person, and I think going through some sort of a process would have been very enlightening to everybody. So I'm pursuing the process. I really believe strongly, along with, I think that former President Obama and Speaker Nancy Pelosi both think there should be a process. They spoke out about that. And, you're going to find out, as number two, you have your own views, but you're basically part of that team. What's her own views on some of these issues? And it's going to be whether the border, is going to be a hot, contentious situation. Is anyone taking serious the debt that we have, the educational opportunities, or a lack of educational opportunities, or student, basically, performance, things of this sort? These all need to be talked about. And we seem to be basically people who are opposed to Donald Trump is thinking that's going to carry the day. It's not. People want issues.
You said, I'm pursuing the process. Are you going to...
I'm just continuing to push this process.
You're going to push the process. Are you considering running?
The people are pushing in that direction, and it's something, if they're pushing that direction, I've said, let's pass the torch to a new generation. There's an awful lot of people that you've shown on the screen that now they're considering as vice president. Nobody's been through a process knowing really where they stand. Joe Biden went through a process in 2020 against an awful lot of left parts of our party, and the party went with someone centrist that thought they could win. Are we in that same category right now? Are we in a centrist category, or are we in a far left category? Think about this, Casey. I'm an independent now. 51% of people participating in an electoral process are registered independents. Only 23% are registered Democrats. Only 25% are registered Republicans. If either side can't capture that middle, which is where the center of this country, where the common sense, and they just want to tap it down a little bit and not push on to me, even though you think that's part of the policy and you're playing to the base. Is that where the country is? I don't think. Why is there 51% like me? How do they win back Democrats like me?
Do you think you could win the nomination at a Democratic convention?
It's almost impossible for anybody at this point in time once it's been anointed. First of all, I want to thank the President Biden. I've known him for a long time. I've considered him a friend, and I said with heavy heart yesterday, but here's a person that can put every minute of his remaining term towards doing the job of president, trying to bring peace in the Middle East, trying to basically secure our position with Ukraine to defend itself and fight for the freedoms that we want them to have and they want. And then make sure that we show with grace and dignity how you transfer power, superpower of the world. He can do all of that and have the greatest legacy. I thank him for everything he's done. I haven't always agreed, he knows that, but we've worked through our differences. I haven't worked with Kamala any at all, to be honest with you, so we'll see what happens.
Would you consider being Kamala Harris's vice president?
No. No, I'm not a vice. It's a new generation. You don't want a 76-year-old vice president right now.
Well, do we want a 76-year-old president?
Well, if he feels like he's 50, maybe.
Do you feel like you're 50?
Let me just say this. The process for the Democrats, try to win back that center. Joe Biden became president because the center believed that he was in the center. He always had been.
But if there's going to be a process, somebody's got to run against Kamala Harris. Is that going to be you?
Well, I don't think that, I don't know. We'll see. We'll just have to see. The system, you would like to see some sort, have some debates, have something. There's plenty of time. We act like there's no time at all. The European countries, or UK, they have them within 2 or 3 months and do very well.
6 weeks, basically.
Yeah.
Would you run as an independent?
Well, Bernie tried that, but they said he couldn't be an independent, so he had to be an independent Democrat. A socialist independent Democrat is what, And I respect where Bernie came from, and he's still an independent. And if I was going to do that, would I change back to a Democrat? Those are things that have been talked about. This just came about so quickly. I haven't really processed that or gone through it. I have been very humbled by people calling and asking, would you be considered? Would you consider? Would you talk about it? I says, my main thing is that we have a voice. I want the middle to have a voice. I want the center of this country to be able to say we have a voice. We're not extreme left, we're not extreme right. I don't run my life that way.
Right.
Why do I have to only have 2 choices of a party that basically have taken the extremes?
You've mentioned Bernie. Have you explored the process, what it would take for you to be able to put your hat in the ring?
I haven't gotten into any of that right now, no.
Are you willing to re-register as a Democrat if you need to?
I haven't given that serious thought right now. I can tell you why I left and not becoming a Democrat.
Yeah.
No, because of this. I was raised as a Democrat, lifelong Democrat.
Yeah.
Nothing but that. But I was always fiscally responsible and socially compassionate. I always wanted to give people a hand up, and I believe they had to earn everything and basically not being given out. I believed in John Kennedy. That's not what your country can do for you, what you can do for your country, and not the premise now, how much more can my country do for me? We've gotten off course, and we need to get back on course, and the country wants to get back on course, and I hope people have enough courage to do that.
Is Kamala Harris going to keep us on the wrong course?
I have no idea. You don't know that because there's no process to go through. Is it basically full steam ahead? Is it basically some adjustment? I think it would help Kamala to have a little bit of a process to where she could explain, articulate, and have a dialogue.
All right. Senator Joe Manchin, always grateful to have you.
Always good to be with
Never
you,
dull.
Casey. Never dull. That's unbelievable, and it just seems to keep happening.
It does indeed. All right, Senator, thank you so much for coming in.
Happens.
Would you consider being Kamala Harris's vice president?
No. No, I'm not a vice. It's a new generation. You don't want a 76-year-old vice president right now.
Well, do we want a 76-year-old president?
Well, if he feels like he's 50, maybe.
Do you feel like you're 50?
Let me just say this. The process for the Democrats, try to win back that center. Joe Biden became president because the center believed that he was in the center. He always had been.
But if there's going to be a process, somebody's got to run against Kamala Harris. Is that going to be you?
Well, I don't think that. I don't know. We'll see. We'll just have to see. The system, you would like to see some sort, have some debates, have something. There's plenty of time. We act like there's no time at all. The European countries, or UK, they have them within 2 or 3 months and do very well.
6 weeks, basically.
Yeah.
Would you run as an independent?
Well, Bernie tried that, but they said he couldn't be an independent, so he had to be an independent Democrat. A socialist independent Democrat is what, And I respect where Bernie came from, and he's still an independent. And if I was going to do that, would I change back to a Democrat? Those are things that have been talked about. This just came about so quickly. I haven't really processed that or gone through it. I have been very humbled by people calling and asking, would you be considered? Would you consider? Would you talk about it? I says, my main thing is that we have a voice. I want the middle to have a voice. I want the center of this country to be able to say we have a voice. We're not extreme left, we're not extreme right. I don't run my life that way.
Right.
Why do I have to only have 2 choices of a party that basically have taken the extremes?
You've mentioned
about the childless cat lady
I've
comment.
never heard of that. That was a weird comment I've never heard before.
He basically was criticizing women political leaders who don't have kids.
I just never heard the comment. The way it was, it's just a very weird way of saying something. If you don't like somebody, if you're against somebody, then say it. But calling them a name. But I'm just so sick and tired of all the name calling anyway.
Do you agree with the Harris campaign that he's weird?
Well, that was a weird comment. That definitely is weird. Some of the different things and positions they've taken seems fairly weird to me. And weird means basically when you have rational, supposedly very educated, rational people saying things that just are so far out of the mainstream that, I thought I've heard everything as long as I've been around, but there are some things I haven't heard, and I thought that was a very weird way of putting it. Yeah, I mean, this thing here is just, the name calling back and forth that goes on, I mean, you know, and really the attacks is coming from former President Trump and all them. It just, my God, just say what you're for and say what you're against, or say what you agree and what you don't agree with, and go from there. So we'll see. I think it's going to be very interesting.
What do you think of him as a candidate, J.D. Vance?
This is the first time I've seen him. I was up there, and Tim Ryan, I was up and tried to help Tim a little bit, and Tim's been a friend of mine for a long time, but I never did run into J.D. until he came here, so I'd only been here for 2 years. I just don't know.
You've seen him as a candidate the last couple of weeks. What do you think?
Well, the candidate, yeah, I think that, I don't think that the news he's making is the news they thought he would make.
Did they make a mistake by selecting him?
That wasn't my selection.
Who do you think Harris should pick?
I really don't. I think she has a tremendous amount of truly, truly deep talent. Her bench is so deep. I don't think she can go wrong picking. The ones I've heard are all good people. I know them all. And they're all, the ones that are governors are very centrist moderate, really, that understand 60% of us are in that middle. So I think that she'll make a good selection because I think she has a good pool of candidates to pull from.
It sounds like you're open to supporting her.
I'm open for this country to get its legs under it in the centrist movement. There's 60% of us that truly are center left, center right. And those of us who basically have chosen no party affiliation think that these parties have gone so far left and right, and if they can't win there. There's only 23% registered Democrats, 25% registered Republicans in the country. They've got to go to the middle. So whoever gets to that sensible middle and does it in a respectful way, that people say, that makes sense to me, and it's not weird, they'll be okay.
What do you make of Mike Kelly? You've worked, or Mark Kelly, you've worked with him.
Oh, he's the best of the best, too. They're just so good. They're just so good. Mark is so smart and so good.
If he was on the ticket, would you support him?
Mark's just a good guy. You'd be lucky. Kamala Harris has a tremendous amount of talent on her bench to have a winning team. Let's put it that way. And all of them can do the job. I don't see any flaws in that. Tim Walton, I know Tim forever. We've worked close together. I've known Andy Beshear, his dad and I served together as governors. I know them. I know Josh Shapiro next door. I don't know Gretchen that well, but, you know, she seemed to have done a tremendous job up there. So every name I have heard has been a quality name.
What do you think of Harris flip-flopping on fracking and on single payer?
I don't know about, I said 4 years make a big difference where she was at before and where she is now. I'm tickled to death that she understands we have to have an all-in energy policy. Tickled to death with that. Tickled to death she says Roe v. Wade. Just codify. That's what my bill does. That's what Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins asked. Just codify. Something had 50 years of precedented law. Those types of common sense. No one's talking about the debt of the nation. We've hit $35 trillion, and you all didn't say a word about it. $35 trillion, and you all haven't. Did you say something?
That was going to be my question for you. Yeah, what's your reaction to the national debt hitting $35 trillion?
It's just awful. I mean, and no one's even talking about it. As I recall, when I first got here in 2010, first thing that Admiral Mike Mullen said, the greatest threat that we have as a nation and as a country is the debt of the nation. It's the thing he's most concerned about. It can take us down. And it's still true today, more so than ever.
And what's your relationship like with Andy Beshear? Have you talked to him?
I know Andy. I like Andy, absolutely. He comes from good stock and he understands it. He has the compassion. It shows. I mean, you know, when Andy talks and he knows he's going through, whether it's a hurricane or whatever's hit his area, a tornado, or any type of devastation, you know, you can tell the empathy he has and the love he has of his people. So that's what it takes.
Is he your preference?
Huh?
Is he your preference?
You know, Andy's my neighbor.
Yeah, but is he your preference?
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm not picking a preference. You said, I know Andy, I know Josh, okay? I know Roy a little bit, and I think Roy pulled himself out of it. I did know Gretchen as well. And I know my buddy Mark Kelly. So, can't go wrong. She's got a good stable there.
Thank you.
Chair Murray and Ranking Member Collins, I want to thank you all for your leadership again this year. Appropriation process through the regular order again, and I think it's commendable that you all work so hard in your staff, so I really appreciate working. My staff has appreciate working with all of you. As you know, I've long called for the return of regular order to pass our appropriations bill on time. Our reliance on continuing resolutions, CRs, unnecessarily cost billions of dollars, only adding to the deficit as we talk to all the agencies and departments. I was pleased that the Fiscal Responsibility Act included incentives to return to regular order, as well as top lines that are roughly consistent with my call to cap spending at 1% each year. And I appreciate that the three bills before us align with those top lines. I want to applaud the subcommittee chairs and ranking members in the three subcommittee bills before us, including Senator Heinrich, Hoeven, Sinema, Bozeman, Reed, Fisher for working in a bipartisan manner to achieve this. However, it became clear last year the details of the debt limit deal were made intentionally murky, including a number of handshakes, side agreements, and that I hope will not repeat this year, and I'm sure they won't. West Virginians want us to do our jobs and be honest with them, not to play part of politics with the national debt. As of this morning, the national debt was a staggering $34.8 trillion. That's almost $3 trillion more than this committee met the last year to kick off the fiscal year 2024. Our national debt was $14.1 trillion in February 2011. In the time since, we have added more than $20 trillion to that total with bipartisan enthusiasm. That's over $94,000 for every American. Never in the history of our nation have we so quickly amassed so much debt, and several presidents in both parties play a major role in getting us to this position. The best way that we can avoid CRs is to allow the annual appropriations process to move forward, and for that reason, I support 302B as we have top-line spending levels before the committee today that are consistent with the bipartisan debt ceiling goal. My grandfather liked to say, unmanaged debt will lead you to make cowardly decisions. We can't keep making cowardly decisions. Thank you, Madam President.
Manchin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank both of you all for very informative discussions this morning, and I appreciate all the hard work you've done. When I first came to the Senate in 2010, I came leaving the governor's office of West Virginia and wasn't really that much in tune on the national threats that we had. I was worried about the threats we had in West Virginia. So when I came here, I tried to bone up I was on this committee, my first committee, and I'll never forget, and it had to be early February or late January of 2011, we had all the Joint Chiefs of Staff and all the questions were being asked and identifying the problems we had around the world and the threats we had. And the question was asked to Admiral Mullins, Mike Mullins at that time, what's the greatest threat the United States faces? I thought I'm going to hear about, learning about China more and about Russia and always being Russia and the threat that they have. And then all of a sudden, without hesitating, he said, the debt of our nation is the greatest threat that we face as Americans. So I would ask you all, since we just hit $35 trillion of debt yesterday, what do you all believe is the greatest threat we face? Jane?
Well, let me agree with you that our hemorrhaging debt is a huge threat. And one of the things
no one's even talking about either of national
we
Democrat,
do.
Republicans, nobody.
Senator, we do in this report. We identify the national debt as a national security threat. And we say that we need to spend smarter and spend more on defense and pay for it. We, on a unanimous basis, are not recommending printing more money. We are recommending finding a way to raise the revenues and reform entitlements. I know that's a sacred cow, sadly, these days, but reform entitlements. And we point out that the interest on the debt is larger than our defense budget.
So you both agree to that?
Yes,
Ambassador?
yes, sir.
Okay. Second, I would say that on your report, you talked about the current force structure that we have, and I think you had identified that the Marines are the only ones meeting that, and we agree with that. What you failed to do is basically identify why we have not, or why you all did not take up women being in selective service or joining selective service, because women make up 74% healthcare and education industry, 52% of financial activities. They're a tremendously strong force, and there's a lot of women I don't want to go up against, I can tell you that, in so many ways. But why do you believe, I guess my question is simple, does the commission support women registering for selective service?
Well, I'll speak for myself. I do. I think that women are a majority of our population, a majority of the talent pool. Many of the most talented women serve on this committee. So yes, they should be. We should be. And
I'll make it clear that it does not. We talked about does not require women to participate in military draft.
I understand.
Which would also require
it's registering.
Yeah, registering.
Yes,
that's all.
And my answer to that is yes.
How come y'all didn't address it?
I don't have a good answer for you, Senator Manchin. It's not something we took up. We looked at other elements of the recruiting challenges that that the services face.
I got you. Well, I hope you all would visit that, if you will. So I have two more questions. My next question would be Russia. What have we learned about Russia during the Ukraine war? Do you think it's basically shown Russia's vulnerability, or have they learned basically where their vulnerabilities were, strengthened them? What's your concerns?
I think we've learned a lot of things. I mean, first, I think we've learned that corruption is a feature, not a bug, of the system that Vladimir Putin has created since he became president of Russia, at the turn of the century. I think we've learned that Russian military doctrine is not necessarily going to predict how they actually will fight when a conflict comes up. I think we've learned that we've relearned a lesson that has been true of Russian military history for hundreds of years, which is they're willing to sacrifice the lives of their service folks to gain an objective without regard, to the human costs.
If I could, my final question, if I could, real quickly. I commend your report on attention to defense industrial base, especially munitions and supply chain. However, there was no mention of solid rocket motors. We have a problem. And the problem is this: we continue to keep pouring money into Aerojet Rocketdyne that continually falls short of producing the quality of rockets in the amount we need, but the government is into that, supporting it. And yet the federal government, we own the ABL lab at Rocket City in West Virginia, and they have been producing unbelievable, and no one's saying a word about it. No one's basically pushing. Why are you shoving money into a private entity when the board changes? Who's buying stock ownership when you already own one? Have you all looked at that, or would you, and basically bring it to a higher level?
Sure, absolutely. And you'll be missed here. You have been very articulate at identifying things, not just that West Virginia does, but the energy needs of this country and why it matters that we export more energy.
If you would look into it and compare ABL at Rocket City in West Virginia, versus Aerojet Rocketdyne, and look at the ownership, the production, the quality of what we're producing there, because without that, as we've said before, we can't compete. We just can't. So if you would do that, I would appreciate it. Okay? Thank you all.
Thank you, Senator Manchin.
You may have heard that Kamala Harris reiterated today that she wants to get rid of the filibuster in order to pass Roe legislation.
Shame on her. Shame on her. She knows that the filibuster is the holy grail of democracy. It's the only thing that keeps us talking and working together. You get rid of that, and this would be the House on steroids.
So I know that you've been considering endorsing her.
Oh,
Does this change your view?
That ain't going to happen.
You're not going to endorse her?
I'm not endorsing on no. I think that's basically something that can destroy our country, and my country is more important to me than any one person or any one person's ideology. I think it's the most horrible thing. And Chuck Schumer knows how I feel about this.
You were going to talk to her, did you?
I haven't.
You have not?
I have not.
But you're saying now that
I'll talk to everybody. That to me, that's beyond, way beyond now, because there's no stopping that. You can't do a little bit of this because of this issue or this issue. The issue we have is no one wants to work together while we're the United States and keep us the United States and not continue to make us a divided state.
Yeah.
And that's what that does.
She had previously said this, that she would support getting rid of the filibuster.
Well, she said she supported banning fracking, too, and she changed that.
Yeah.
I was hoping she would change this.
Okay. Thank you, sir.